Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now.
Well, and congratulations to all of you who made it through Friday night. It's a little thinner, but it looks good. Shifting money. I'm not talking about the usual stuff. It's money, Jim, but not as we know it. And shift, well, if you Google that, you'll find something fairly goth. But if you look for shift happens, you'll find more entertaining stuff. I look at it as perhaps phase shift, perhaps paradigm shift. The difference between the two being that from one there is no return. So it's a heavier duty thing. And that's what I want to talk about today. So, the miracles of modern technology. This is 3 weeks ago, Barcamp Bank, Seattle. I was seeing the new Mac for the first time, and I think I can echo Guy Kawasaki's comment that the world would be a better place if there were a lot of those, particularly if I had one. That was my major thought. And indeed, this presentation is not running on my machine, it is running on a Mac. Thank God for that. Now, I think we'll just shift straight into, well, no, we'll stay with that for a second, because the chronology of this is when I first heard about GNOME-DEX. I had no idea it existed, and in fact, I hadn't even heard of Robert Steele until a few days later, when I got mixed into a loop with Chris and Robert about GNOME-DEX, and culminated in an invitation to be here. Now, this is not my first public presentation, but it is my first use of PowerPoint. So I am a virgin today, too. Now, I'm going to go into this through 4 stages and out of it again. And it's sort of in, turn around, and come out. And it's the center point that matters, because the center point is the piece which is new, very new, last few weeks. The preliminaries, well, that's a different story. I'm going to push it fast. The issue here is leave your brain on cruise control. If you think too hard about this, it will just hurt. And if you want to change your mind, be gentle with it. First of all, we're going to talk about phase shift, paradigm shift in the money. Then I'm going to deal with the why and how, and then our experience. And then that'll give you a good reason why we were stuck at the midpoint for some years and why we're so pleased to be coming out of it. Shift happens. But it happens in its own good time, you will note. Because you can't go out and order it. You can't say, I'm going to take a weekend off, go down the coast and shift some paradigm. It's not your option. Paradigm shift is something that happens to you, and you don't always get much notification or control of the situation. In fact, control is not what happens. And since paradigm shift is generally about shifting a worldview, we tend to be rather resistant. So expect to hear your mind screaming slightly in the background. That's normal. It's good for you. If your mind isn't screaming, if it's not spinning somewhere with us, then one of us has gone to sleep on the job. And if you can see the paradigm shift coming, it gives you a bit of room. Now, I'm going to make an outrageous projection here. I'm going to say that sometime in the next few years, everybody in this room, almost everybody in this room, will be using open money as well as conventional money. I don't know when, and you don't know when, but I know it's going to happen, and my purpose today is to give you some idea of why I know it's going to happen. You get the choice about when it becomes a relevant reality for yourself. So, it's a question of when you change. If you notice in this statement, the only thing that you have any control over is the when. The rest of it is what happens around you. And as a preliminary to getting into the money, I wanted to make the analogy of the origin of the wheel. Before the wheel definitely was the log. Now, if you think about it, logs were there, they required no significant engineering, and they moved heavy things, provided you had a bunch of people to push. And so for many millennia, there would have been logs, and it would have been quite a stretch to create the wheel. If you browse through your ideas about that, you'll see that there was a lot to be done to make the shift from something which had its substance in what people thought they knew and how they looked at it. Oh, that's big, heavy, it must be a good one. And the concept of its function. What was it that made logs effective as transport devices? Well, in my thesis, the financial industry has not moved past the logs. You know, all the glitz of online transfers, micropayments, this, that, and the other cryptographic you-know-whats, it's still shifting logs in cyberspace. We have not yet addressed what money is, and we're still messing around trying to shift the substantive things instead of looking at the function. So, the theory of money. Now, this is the hard stuff. It's going to take, if I'm lucky, 8 minutes. So, start the clocks. It's not going to hurt, honestly. General condition of money. Is this familiar? All right? Now, this is the condition we have when we use conventional government-issued bank central money. It's a commodity. It is issued in a certain volume, a certain amount, and therefore we are in the position of negotiating a zero-sum game with this commodity. And the basics, that's the way it's got to be. If everybody could create this money, it would be all over the place, it would be valueless, it would not move. And the primary function of money is it moves. If it doesn't move, it's not money. So within conventional money, the rule is the banks create it, we use it. They don't like you making it yourself. You print it, they get real pissed. That's true. So, its function is to come and go. You know that. It comes, it goes. Now, the key point about this is, when it's gone, it's gone. I mean, how many times have you seen the same dollar bill twice? Try it sometime, write your name on it, spend it, see if it ever shows up again. Right? I mean, sure, the way you spend money affects your income. Like if you go out and buy a gun, you can go and rob a bank. It will work. But they won't give you the same money that you just spent to get the gun. The process is that when you spend this medium of exchange, you say goodbye to it. I'll emphasize that again. It doesn't come back. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't know who you are. It doesn't mind. The value of the money lies in the money itself as an instrument that has been determined, essentially, by our banking institutions. So be it. Well, trouble is, we're sitting between a trickle down and a pour away. And I think most of us are more aware of the imminence of the distribution of money, that the money goes, than we are of how we get it in. And in fact, we generally feel that it's coming in thin and going out fast. Now, if you look at that in general terms, a community as a whole, the same thing applies. And this was the origin of my own interest in this stuff. Small community on the inside of Vancouver Island, about 40,000 people, and all of a sudden the money dried up greatly. There was heavy bank interest rates, 14%, mortgages were running 15, 20%. The air base moved a fighter squadron out of town, took 400 families. The US newsprint industry was down, and that meant that our logging was down as well, and it was a bad year for fish. Add it all up, it was a bad year for business. And many of us found we had no money. So that's a big problem. And in fact, it's a common problem all over the place. When you deal with a commodity money, it's not the right amount for every part of your nation state. So if it may be cooking in Boston or San Francisco, it doesn't mean that it's going great guns in North Dakota. So you've got a big problem with making the resources that facilitate an economy available where they're needed. It would be absurd if I went out to build a house and I had the tools and I had the materials and I had the planning permission and I had the labor and I had everything I needed, but I didn't have any feet and inches. Because there was a bigger project on the other side of town and all the feet and inches had gone over there. So we had no feet and inches, so I can't do anything. But that's an exact analogy to what happens in our economy. Redundant resources all over the place because we don't have a means of exchange. Okay. Well, when it all dries out in your community, as it did in ours, the obvious thing is conceive of a virtual barrel. Now, just as in the previous slide, can you go up one? The level in the barrel is an up and down phenomenon. It's a vector. It's just a number in your bank statement. Okay? In a virtual bank, you can have a virtual level. And a transaction is a transfer between two current accounts. I spend some virtual money with you, I go negative, you go positive. And this comes into a self-managing closed network. Pretty much like a bunch of kids on a bouncy trampoline sort of thing. One goes down, one goes up. It's just a transfer of energy that has some people going negative, some people going positive. Then people who've gone negative have essentially issued a monetary promise. It's a profound social political act. You have printed your own money and issued it into the circulation of a community who accept it at some level. Now, the size of the system, so far there's no information about how big these can get, beyond indications that it's in the millions rather than the thousands. I can provide you with some background information on that if you're interested later. Obviously, the smaller the system, the higher the regenerative, the reflux, the flowback. But then again, the smaller the system, the less variety. So the idea is to look for a balance between having brain surgeons in your system or having the money come back fast. The measure can be in time. It can be in kilowatt hours. It can be in anything that the people who participate agree to put it in. And they do come up in all shapes and sizes. Rules as agreed. Now, I want you to conceive of this rather like an email group. Yahoo puts up an email group or any other place. The rules are as determined by the initiator and those who choose to join. Very similar model here. Now, little piece about the paying process. When somebody does me a favor, there's a variety of things I can do. One of them is I can pay them off. I either pull out the cash, lay it down, thank you very much, it's done. End of our relationship. Now, that's the usual way the world works economically. But it means the money's gone. Because I've spent it, gives it to him, he's spent it, I'll never see it again. So it's not an ongoing system in terms of me. It's ongoing in terms of the planet, but it's not ongoing in terms of me. The other way is pay it back. You do me a favor, I do you a favor. Very 1-1. There's no propagation in that whatsoever, and it is actually the most difficult socioeconomic process that we can engage in. That's why there's not a hell of a lot of it actually happens. Now, a third one, recently the pay it forward phenomenon. Anybody see the Spacey film, Kevin Spacey? Yeah. Well, lovely things happen in Hollywood. That is, I do you a favor, but I don't want it back because you're going to do it for him, because he's going to do it for her, because she's going to do it for you, because you're going to do it for me, because in Hollywood, everything goes round in circles. Of course, in the real world, it doesn't. So in the pay-it-forward model, what happens basically is that gift exchange propagates out, dissipates, and dies. It's a good game, but it doesn't go very far. What we do with closed-loop currencies is essentially we take that same gifting and we make it into a closed, recirculating, regenerative process. What goes around comes around, quite simply. Now, this is a quasi-tribal economy. And I say quasi because there's so many concepts of what a tribe is and how it works. But I think we can generally say that any persistent community in previous histories has survived because there was this give and take and balancing. And if it didn't balance, then you were out at some level. Now, if one tribe, why not 2, 3, 4, 5? And this is an absolutely critical distinction in the evolution of this idea and its history of its propagation. The 10, 12 people who were in one cluster agreeing to do it one way, well, that might have been measured in dollars, and then there's several of us want to do a childcare network or a car share thing or a reputation currency, or We want to be engaged in a regional currency that goes right across the area. Well, rather than having one entry, one system, why not one entry account and as many systems as you wish to join? Again, the analogy to an email address and email lists. And this is what gives it power. This is what makes it really go. And gives it the requisite variety. I'm very hot on tribes, but I don't want the phobic tribes of the past, which is, you know, you're in or you're out, me against them, that sort of stuff. I mean, most of us nowadays could identify at least a dozen tribes that we are part of. Some of them intensively, some of them very occasionally. But we're in many. And our society thrives on that, and the internet is powering it up magnificently. So I think we ought to be looking at monetary systems that support that. Now, of course, in terms of scaling, you can't do it on one server. You've got to spread it out. That's obvious, I think. Load factors, stability, security, all sorts of issues say spread it out, many servers. And of course, open code. I mean, let's be sensible about this. There's no point in not doing it any other way, right? And open standards for the direct exchange between two servers that may be running on different platforms using different code. So far, so good. What else? Right. Just to sort of touch on some of the details of this, what community currencies are or are not. They are not replacements. We're not talking about put all your money in a brown paper bag, leave it at the end of the road, we'll pick it up later. We're not taking on the Federal Reserve. I'll leave that to Robert Steele. Good luck, Robert. Personally, I don't stand in front of locomotives either, right? You know, like, you've got to have a bit of balance in where you go. I really appreciated Bob's stuff. I think it's very juicy, and I like the intent behind it. But I want to make the point that this is utterly agnostic. It's apolitical. This is in the level of time flies, gravity sucks, money moves. You know, these are just basics. And it's not about how, why, where, what, when. This is just about a facilitation. It's like the internet is dumb at the center and smart at the edges. And these money systems are going to operate the same way. So it's used with instead of, not instead of. It's like hamburger helper for your budget, you know? Thicken it out. It's tax accountable virtually everywhere, although there are some systems which are not tax accountable because they're measuring in hours for social favors, for instance, and there are certain dispensations. When we say it's open, it doesn't mean that your business affairs or your personal affairs are open to anybody else except yourself. This is exactly like being in a bank or a credit union or any other institution like that. Now, the government can, of course, get at these accounts with proper due process in the courts, except in this country where courts process, well, hell, it's the IRS, isn't it? So the rules are a little different in this country, but I don't think they'll stay that way. Everywhere else in the world, this is no disclosure to tax authorities without the permission of the account holder or the court order. Curious thing about this is it's not in competition with anything, nothing. And I spent a long time working on this because when we came up with these ideas, the first thought was, what's the point in starting this if some bozo in government can come along and sit on it, or the banks can wipe you, or anything else like that? David, you've got a hand up. No, they love money. And you're going to pay it on your income and expenditures in this process. They all love it. They've got it in the books, man. They know how to get money from you for whatever you do. If you give me a haircut, and I polish yours, then... then if either of us is a professional, that's an income and it's accessible by the IRS, and they'll ding you for cash on it. So this is the same deal. Applies through sales tax, all sorts of stuff. I'll come to that later. But, I mean, even the loan sharks, this is actually going to make their life better, and it's going to stabilize banking, funnily enough. And banks are going to take a long time to work that out, but they will in due course. Key factor in its propagation, it's business friendly. This is the loyalty system to beat all loyalty systems. And it does it by collaboration rather than competition. And it's got an advantage for the small businesses over the extra large, the large, and the extra, extra large businesses. really, actually, it makes the playing field level, which gives the small, medium business the flexibility to move. Currently, of course, the playing field is heavily tilted towards aggregation and size. Markets are conversations, they tell us in the Clue Train Manifesto. And one of the things you will notice is that when there's no money around, the conversation is distinctly muted. So money is the medium, the carrier. It's the thing that makes it go. Now, conventional money carries in a particular way. If I use the phrase, money talks, every one of us gets a sense of what that means. We know what that means. It means power. It means control. It means authority. It means precedence. It means all sorts of things that we are so familiar with in the monetary context that we take them for granted. Well, the conversation around open money is entirely different. In fact, if you had to put it into an analogy, it's a gender comparison. Conventional money is very much of the male nature. Open money is very much of the female. It's a relationship money. There's no coercion, there's no power, there's just lots of consent and relationship built into it. In terms of these shifts, if you think of the difference between direct current and alternating current, the technologies are utterly different. If you think of how AM radio works in one way, FM radio produces an entirely different space medium technology. Well, the ultimate one, probably the laser. The laser is just light. It's just, however, coherent light. It's light that has information fundamentally at its core. And if we didn't have that, then none of us would be sitting here playing with these funny boxies these days. Lasers have changed the world. And frankly, open money has the capacity to do exactly the same sort of scale of change in the economy that lasers have done in the technology. Last one on the theory of money. The big killer game on this is if you go to somebody and say, listen, you've got this money and that money. This is the normal, this is the local. You spend this, it's gone. And you've still got the local. On the other hand, if you can spend the local, it's gone, but it's coming back, and you've still got the cash. Now, that's our basic business proposition. That's the one that makes this thing realistic. Now, that was the solution. That was the explanation. What's wrong and what we're going to do to fix it. Now I'm going to show you what we did, the practice. Well, 1983. I was a younger man. And if you're wondering why I don't look really happy about this, it's because I quit computing in 1970. I had had enough, and the industry had had enough of me too. Nobody objected. I'd stopped coding. But the only way to make this work really simply was to use the only computer in town, a microcomputer of some sort, micro something, can't remember what it is, $25,000, 10-inch floppies, 64K. But with that and an answering machine, we ran the whole thing. But fundamentally, it was practice, 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 because what you find out is that just because it's a simple idea doesn't mean that it's easily communicated or implemented. Let's.net has the basic chronology of our stuff. So if you're intrigued at how this blew out and what happened, you can follow some of it there. But it began with what we called the Let's system. Let's meant enable, permit, allow, facilitate, invite. It's not an acronym. We were forced to make it a backronym because everybody said it's got to stand for something. So we said it's a local exchange trading system. And the local word has been a real pain. So I wish we'd never done it. It all operated on a phone message machine. So 24/7, this little machine sat there and it took transactions like, this is Michael, credit Joe, $45 for load of manure. That was it. That was our operational system, and it could have been accounted by any accounting package that was capable of spitting out statements. So that was our game. We also supported it with a classified ad. This was our first use of PageMaker, not on a Mac frame, but it still worked. We managed to put a lot of ads on a piece of paper, include it with the account statements. And the whole damn thing worked like clockwork, far cheaper than any banking system I've ever heard of. We could do the whole thing for 25 cents, top to bottom, per transaction, which was good. It's nice when you don't have bricks and mortar, or for that matter, staff, or for that matter, administration, or at least no management. It was just a collective time-sharing process. In '85, we started open source distribution, and since then, there's probably been about 3,000 startups of variants of this idea worldwide. As far as I can tell, the estimate of the transaction base in those, because they've been very fitful. They start, they stop, they go, they come, they do all sorts of things. It's probably between $10 million and $100 million has been generated in different parts of the world by this process. Lots in Europe, lots in Latin America, bugger all in the United States of America. This has been Death Valley for intelligent thought about money for a long, long time. I think it's sort of, you guys have got such a religion about money. There's no other society in the world that has the same ideas about money as the United States. And therefore, you've got an inquisition. You know, if you have a religion, you've got to have an inquisition. So you've got the IRS. So it's a simple deal. And unfortunately, the IRS has been a bit of a squelcher on people's perception. The IRS doesn't care, but people care that they think the IRS might care. So there's been a lot of scrip issue in this country, you know, bits of paper. In our town we trust sort of things, Ithaca Hours, Berkshires, stuff like that. It's trivial, it's paper. Forget it, get real. Waking up. The other problem is singularities. If I offered you a computer with one program, you wouldn't be that excited. Well, that's basically what people did with what we were offering. Our plan at the beginning, right away, was multi-currencies. You could be in dozens of them. But other people were saying, we'll do one first. And that's really difficult. It's like trying a monocycle before you try a bicycle. It's not the right idea. And so a lot of them were sort of stuck on that basis. From '92 in particular, we've been peddling the concept of multiple CCs by the software. And that's a specific development program, and you know, we have software, we have projects, we have admin, we have all that. But the generality we've called open money, because there are so many ways this space can be exploited that it would be ridiculous to consider it as a territory that can be enclosed or owned in any sense. What else? Oh, yes, development. You've got to pay for this stuff. It's very easy to serve. There's no cost in the provision of the service, but there is cost in getting out there, explaining it, developing people's concepts, elaborating the software and whatever. That's all regionally and locally managed. It's not a royalty system. There's no copyrights or anything. Well, there are copyrights, but there's no licensing and fees to the center. You see, when you're working with a different medium, you've got to work a different way. It would be absurd to try and run an airplane like a ship. And when you're developing these ideas, you've got to use the tools that you're using and you're creating. So all of our systems are a little bit different. Community Way, for instance, is a sort of a variant on United Way, but very variant, very, very variant. And it's a red-hot fundraiser for charities, and on 10% of the money raised for charities, it's a very hot fundraiser for the projects themselves. Smart cards. We have smart cards. An 8K card, 15 currencies can be supported on this, and that comes from a population of something like 270, yeah, let's have another slide on that. 270 million different currencies can be named in the space that this 8K card operates. This is a point-of-sale device. It carries one card inside it for the vendor. The purchaser puts a card in the slide, bang, bang, transfers money from pocket to pocket. Dead easy. And 10K was our entire development cost for getting this package put together. It's Mondex equipment. It was originally designed for use in Europe for the international transfers, people muttering around, going from Deutschmarks to francs and whatever. But they could never get the security handled, not to the satisfaction of the central banks. And so there was nothing really in it for the banking industry, so the whole thing languished. But we were able to piggyback on the technology and got a really good package. For instance, this is us doing it in the Comox Valley, using the Community Way model, raising money for charities, stimulating circulation through the businesses, doing it with smart cards. And you will notice, if you look really closely, it's all in Japanese. Because we got absolutely no coverage of this anywhere in the Western world, although you could say Japan is the Western world these days. Certainly nothing locally. Our local newspaper didn't cover it. Our local radio station didn't cover it. Our local banks wouldn't talk to us. No movement at all. And this, well, this all happened in the last millennium, my friends. This is 1998, 99 we were doing this stuff. So what's the explanation of all this, it comes, it goes? I'd advise you to, if you're interested in these things, take a look at The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn, 1962. It's a brilliant book about how societal change happens in the so-called scientific community. At the bottom line with money, perception is reality. If you think it's money, it's money. If you think it's not, it's not. And when you're dealing with virtual money in a virtual world or a local world, those issues are very strong. So we've had a lot of difficulty maintaining credibility in our own community. Now that makes it even more difficult to create credibility in other communities. So we've been up and down the coast, we've been all over the place. There aren't many places we haven't been with this, and there hasn't been a hell of a lot of breakthrough in the other places. And we were stuck without software to take us through the localization into the wider frame. Now, this is where the changes came. And to make it clear how that works, I'll just run you through our domain system. You start with identities in general. Can be people, can be organizations, businesses. They take accounts in our namespace. They can have multiple accounts. Make up your name. You can be identified with it, or it can be a pseudonym if you like, authentic or otherwise. And those are grouped in domains. Now, we're thinking initially more geographic than communities of type, but that's only to open out the distribution. So, for instance, people in Seattle might have accounts joe of sea.wa.us. And that cascading of the domains is what makes the whole thing very manageable. Now, once you're in the domains, once you've got your account name, of course, you can create currencies as you choose, many of them. Putting it all together, that's the basic picture. Now, trying to knit that together with a bunch of amateur software developers who could be any set of these domains was a real pain. We were looking at a serious problem there. However, just a few weeks ago, well, actually, it was over the last year, but culminating in the last few weeks, my two main coders, Jeff Cheshire and Eric Harris-Brown, have revised the entire ontology by the simplest usual method, which is step back and take a look at what you're doing. And when we looked at what we're doing, we realized that we only have 4 entities in our entire system. We have accounts, we have currencies, we have flows, the transactions between accounts, and we have the contexts or domains within which these are all maintained and supported. This entire thing can be supported as a mesh of linked URI. I expect you know more about this now than I do because I'm out of my depth, okay? I don't really know what I'm talking about at this point. But I do know that what we've got here is propagatable in a way that previously was not. May you see the next slide? This is the basic map. The blue things are accounts, and they exist as entities inside 2 different servers there. Accounts can create currencies, they can create flows. Every one of those entities is cross-linked to the other entities in the XML process somehow or other. Again, don't ask me. I'm just the specifications man. And so the process is just what Eric calls the churn for the mesh. There's things got to happen, and this mesh of URI just begins to fill up and fill out. Now, you can look at this on rubyom.openmoney.info. It's wide open, and it's not complete. It doesn't fully work at all, and there's no password permissions. You can go in, create accounts, have fun, whatever. It will crash. It will die. But if you're interested in these things, you'll be able to see a bit about what we're playing with, and it'll make sense to you, even if it doesn't really make sense to me yet. I look at it as the propagation of a cloud of record, cloud of unknowing. Anybody know that one? Oh dear, where is your medieval mysticism? Come on. Anyway, a cloud of knowing is sort of, it doesn't mean everybody knows everything. This isn't about all your affairs being in space, but it just means that everything is out there on the internet, and you can get to it if you have the relevant permissions. It's going to be very nice. It relates these communities of identity. Now, this is important to see that your communities, when you're in a location or a peer group or a community of common interest, those identities are, that's where your security lies. That's your reputation space. That's where you don't piss in the middle of the room, right? So those are the ones that give you self-management through the hierarchy of these domains, because each domain is responsible for its own credentials. We don't have a blacklist system. We have a one-list system. If you're in it, you're in it. If you're not, you're not. And if domains are misbehaving, if they've got too much fraud and, I don't know, whatever going on, they can be cut out, just dropped. The other communities are the communities of action, the doing space rather than the being space. And they're just defined by what you want to do and how it happens. So they're much more juicy, and they're where you are an individual. You're an individual on the basis of your reputation in some degree of common with the others in your identity space, but your behavior in every currency is you. So that's the one where you matter. All right. Now, because we've got this software that I've been waiting for 10 years, we published specifications for this concept in '95, but it was very cumbersome, the original stuff, and gradually it got refined to this. I'm 10 years happier than I was 10 years ago. And so the next steps are basically based upon, yippee, let's go. Open season, really. The unique selling proposition, you want some money? Yeah? It's not difficult, particularly because it's not my money I'm giving away. It's your money I'm giving you. Fundamentally, recognize this. This is your money. This is your activity in your own communities. So it's a whole different world. Cost of service, it's nothing. Dirt cheap. I mean, even when you get to the point of sale, this smart card package, for instance, $100 to equip a restaurant or a small business with one of these things. That's one-time cost. And the transaction cost on the cards, nothing. Now, also we've got this development funding that drives on the applications. It's like, you know, if you start to build the first violin, you've got to be able to play a tune, right? There's no point in trying to sell violins without having a tune. So we're propagating this thing by the demonstration that it can use to raise large sums of money for charities, local and non-local, third world, wherever. So that's our basic put it out level. It also funds itself in the inside. Now, we're beginning on the game space because games are fun. Playing games, virtual worlds is probably the first because places like Second Life, EverQuest, it's fascinating. They've recreated conventional money inside their virtual space. I mean, that's logs inside logs sort of thing. It's really a convoluted abstraction. And the nice thing about playing in these virtual worlds is who cares if it blows up, goes sideways, or takes forever? You know, it doesn't matter. Nothing in those places matters at all. Virtual communities, different thing. I'm talking about things like LinkedIn, eAcademy, Facebooks. I mean, just think of the possibilities inside those frameworks for community currencies. And then there are the so-called real-world games. Now that's where I'm talking about you are your own avatar, and you conceive of a method to fund your school's computer lab or raise the hospital clinic system somehow or other, or. So there's a million games that can be played in a localized, let's work it out level. Personally, I'm interested in Van City. I don't know, Van City is one of the biggest credit unions in Canada. And I've been to their doors 6 or 7 times in the last 25 years. I'm coming again. They've opened a site called changeeverything.com or CA, which is an invitation to tell them how the clients want to see their credit union and community work. And a later one called weallprofit.vancity.com is even more in your face. Here it is, let's go. Well, hey, if they open the door, so we're going to take on Vancity again and try and get them to be sensible about what money really is. A micro kicker in it is the game. Let's play. If this gets to your eyeballs, you are imprinted. The virus is set. The virus is set. This is a really nice game. You can play it a room full with as many cards as there are people, and it's a giggle. It goes crazy. It takes 2 or 3 hours to do it, and you've got to know what you're doing. Otherwise, there's no closure. But it's a great sort of Tupperware deal. So you get a bunch of people around the kitchen table for a few hours. You play this, and then you send them to the online game, which is fundamentally boring because it's a bit like a driving range in the dark or something like that. You don't actually know anybody else in the game. You're just playing through a sort of click, bang, select, no thinking required. But from a total of about 20 minutes exposure to this game, we figure that you are totally infected. You don't stand a chance after that. And you are intelligent in the calculus of this process. We can actually make sensible discussions about it. So the game is a big one. It's also a small fundraiser because it's a sort of a feedback to the people who are sponsoring it. If you liked it, give them $10 sort of thing. That's sort of a feed throw. And we expect this to be a youth initiative. We see kids doing a lot of this stuff. That's in our minds at least. So those are the games. The realities are food security, community-supported agriculture, 100-mile diets, that stuff, right? Labor, we cannot pay in farming in conventional money. We can pay them in local money. CO2 accounting, carbon counts, and our entitlement to pollute the atmosphere is a global exchange. At some stage or other, we are going to have carbon rationing. And it's a bloody good idea, and the sooner the better. And we are going to get into this on the level of energy component tracking. We'd like to see every business be saying, oh, our retail price is so many dollars, and it's 22% energy sensitive. Things like this will give people a bit of a heads up on where things are going to go in the next few years. Third world development. I keep running across people like this man Gates, who's trying to sort out malaria, AIDS, all sorts of things. Great. I just wish he knew what he was bloody doing. Because the tools he is using will not solve the problem. If we're going to do anything about the inequities of global economic processes, we've got to use monetary systems that do not propagate the problem, but in fact do something to alleviate it. Last thing on this list, open source. Open source, open community processes. How do we pay for these things? Open money. And this will give us the variety to meet the challenges that we're going to be facing in due time. Open Money Development Group. That's me and a bunch of others. And it's been a lot. There's about 500 people been involved in this in 25 years. It sort of flourishes and comes up and down. Virtually corporate, which is to say we are not a corporate entity. We're a collective, not a cooperative, not formally incorporated. This has always made funding somewhat erratic, and it remains that way, and it would do us a lot better if we had more of it. So contributions are definitely welcome, and I'm willing to talk to anybody about that. It was intriguing when Guy Kawasaki was talking yesterday. He was saying, the 25,000 figure. That's the first time I've heard people talking about those sort of figures as developmental components. And that's basically our bottom line for our next stage. We'll take 2 million, but 25K will do nicely. You see, it's how many matches you need to light a forest fire. If you've got an exothermic process which generates its own heat, you don't need much internal injections. Projections, run this one real quick. All money's virtual. Get used to it. Let's start designing it as though it was. We're providing a platform here where everybody, technically everybody on the planet, can have access through their phones, through their cell phones, through intermediaries, to a monetary process. And a monetary process that allows you to count anything. You can count the hairs in your head if you think it's relevant, but it may not interest anybody else. So you measure what matters, and the ranges are not merely monetary. There are all sorts of other areas. Yet another social network? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, this is a social network. And money is, I mean, it's the social network. It's ultimately pervasive. It's so persistent, we don't even notice it. Trouble is, the network sucks. It's very, very destructive. Because it's illogical. It's stupid. But the longer we persist in our dependency on that, the more we continue to propagate the sort of disorders that our planet and our societies are suffering from. So I feel there's a certain amount of urgency in this process, and I would welcome others who feel the same way. Shifting, well, as I said, it's the way you look at things. And the clock has started. I mean, it took me several months when I first got into this to sort of have all the things settle and set. And I've seen people who get it in a flash. And I've seen people who don't get it for a long time. I would expect a high proportion of this community, maybe 25, 30%, are already in the shift. Maybe it's phase shift, maybe it's paradigm shift. But I would simply expect that at least 80% of you are still in the red zone, you know? There's the red shift and the blue shift, the red pill, the blue pill. If you're in the red, just sit out, hang out, you'll get it in due course. If you're in the blue, come talk to me. I'm very interested in conversations. Okay, and the last thing, my other work of life is to do with body and balance. So I really appreciate these T-shirts. And I really appreciate how you guys are making a market for me in the next 10 years, because most of you are going to have screwed up necks. And you can thank the mouse for that, mainly. Anyway, we have about 1¼ minutes for questions.
So I'm in the red zone. What is this going to do for me? I mean, right now I can give a guy a piece of plastic and get what I want, and they get what they want. I mean, how does this affect? I can go on a 100-mile diet if I want to, because I can just look in to see what I'm buying. I can get online and get into a bartering system and trade my services for somebody else's services. So what does this do for me? I don't understand. Simply.
It's the money-back guarantee. Focus on the idea the money comes back. Focus on the concept of a persistent community and relationship-building process. But you see, if you're going to be free, you've got to have your own money. At the moment, you don't have your money. So yes, that's the point. We are essentially enabling everybody to have their own sovereign monetary creation within their own communities. The free market starts here. There has never been a free market, and none of the neocons that tell you that they're Adam Smith people are talking any sense at all.
Have you got, can I?
Yeah.
Do you have successful case studies or small examples of where this works, either using your system or not?
Yeah, hundreds of them. But you see, it's a bit like the bike ran great until the guy went off the cliff or something like this. Now, could you focus on how the bicycle works or the cliff that it hit? One of the best ones was Ireland. Do you know that in the 70s, Ireland had a bank strike, and the Irish just started writing checks to each other? And the entire economy ran on paper, endorsed checks for a year. And it was the best year the Irish economy had in the 70s. You won't read about that in the bank system.
Michael, I think you just skipped over a part about the lead system historically that, you know, anyone who hasn't seen it before, when I first saw the lead system in the 80s, it was the part that I said, well, this is insane, is that everyone's bank balance starts at zero, but it goes either up or down from there, and it doesn't really matter. So you spend money before you have it, and then you earn it afterwards, and that's the part that's so weirdly different.
Which is why the game, because in the game, as you buy and sell, you chart from left to right, negative, positive, negative, positive. And after a little while, people understand that the people on the negative side have issued money that the people on the positive side are carrying. So there's a balancing between those two. Very interesting when we take this one over, usually the women say, right, let's go, because I can see I can be totally safe from all risk by operating in and around the negative side, whereas the men start thinking, there's got to be a catch. You're not going to fool me.
All right, Michael, one more question.
One more question. Oh, I'm not going to take another question because I'm around. You can come and find me. And I want blue questions, not red ones. Oh, sorry? Just one more. One more. Well, I got something else to say, but I'll take the question and then I'll say the thing that I'm going to say anyway.
I just wanted to know if you could quickly summarize in like 2 or 3 sentences what is the definition of open money. I think I missed that. Yeah, you probably did, but it'll get to you. Openmoney.org. Openmoney.org is so full of short summaries of the obvious. And eventually it will drop into place. You will get it. Fear not, my friend, fear not. Now look, I've also got to say one thing. This has been delightful talking to you guys, and one thing I'm really clear of is you've got a lot more money than I do. Now, I wouldn't be here paying $500 to sit and listen to me. Couldn't do it. Now, I really appreciate coming here. I wouldn't have missed it for worlds. But I've got to say that it has made a big dent in my budget. Now, one of the things that Joshua's got going is a site called bountyyup.com, where he's talking about how people can collectively put together support for projects of any nature. And if any of you are interested in supporting at a minor level the maintenance of this game and offsetting some of my expenses on this affair, then take a look at bountyyup.com. Anyhow, anybody else I want to talk to, it'll be here and there and wherever. And thank you very much.
Come up. Thank you. Andrew, Josh kind of put a finer point on it before